Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Football Podcast. I'm Nixon. To my right, that is Michael Wein. We are back for another episode previewing our number 14 and 13 teams in the NFL, starting with the Dallas Cowboys and then the Green Bay Packers. If you like what we do here, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. We record twice a week. On this podcast, we're doing our top 20 preview series all the way up to the NFL season. Over on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, we're previewing the entire Texas Longhorns roster, covering fall camp news, college football news, and any recruiting stuff that comes up. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Before we get into the video, Michael, how are you doing, my friend?
Well, last weekend was the last time that we record a podcast and post a podcast with no football all the way up until the second week of February. Now, I get it. I've said on this podcast before. I think I even said it on last week's episodes, not all of which are posted yet. There's more coming, but go check out number 18 and 17 came out yesterday. The preseason, it doesn't matter to me. I'm honestly more interested in hearing about what goes on, in these teams' training camps at the practices than I am watching the games, watching the preseason games. But I would be lying to you if I didn't say it wasn't nice to get some version of football back as the Hall of Fame game occurred on Thursday evening. And so up until February, we got football every weekend, some version of it. Now the next couple of weeks, it's just going to be preseason. But once we get to the last weekend of August, we get real college football, and then we get NFL soon after that. So, and the Cowboys, the first team we're going to talk about today, ranked number 14 on our power rankings, are actually kicking off the season September 4th at Philly. So there's a little nugget for you guys. I'm doing fine. Had a good week. My baseball team continues to piss me off, but other than that, I'm doing good. I'm really excited for football. And let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Yeah, and on the topic of the Hall of Fame game, shout out to Trey Lance, man. I think he looked really solid in that game. He never really got a shot in the runway that a third overall pick typically gets. So when you talk about him being a bust, yeah, he's been a bust, but also you got to take that into account. I think he still has a lot of good football ahead of him. I think there's a chance a team gives him a shot come next year, maybe even Pittsburgh. But we'll get into the episode. Yeah.
There's always a chance for a career revival. We've seen it actually multiple times over the last half decade plus with a guy like Geno Smith, right? He's the primest example. We actually talked about him in our last episode, or in that Raiders episode with the Steelers, the 18-17 episode that just came out. So go check that out. But there are examples of that, like a Ryan Tannehill, for example.
Baker
Mayfield.
Sam Darnold. Yeah.
Baker and Darnold would probably be the best examples akin to Trey Lance, just because they were drafted in both the top three.
Yeah.
But you guys get the point.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's get into the Dallas Cowboys, man. The news out of the Dallas Cowboys world. And if you're new here, I am a Cowboys fan. Allegedly, I am looking at other options at this point. Just kidding, but not really. But yeah, the news out of the Cowboys world over the last few months has surrounded obviously the contract situation and a lack of a contract situation with Micah Parsons, eventually culminating in him requesting a trade, obviously, yesterday or the day before that, one of those two. And it doesn't come as a surprise to me, honestly. I think with how this team is set up right now, with paying Dak $60 million, with paying CeeDee Lamb, second best wide receiver in the league type of money, you can't have three $40 million guys on your roster. That's just not a way to build a football team. Now, is letting Micah Parsons go the right way to go about this? Hell no. But I also think they kind of dug themselves into a hole by not prioritizing Micah Parsons' contract situation sooner. Micah was ready to negotiate last offseason. He approached the Cowboys like, hey, I want a new contract. What's up? And they were like, nah, we're focused on Dak and CD, and basically pushed him off. And now we are where we are, where, TJ Watt just got 40 million. Max Crosby just got his new deal. Obviously, Myles Garrett just got 40 something million. So, I mean, with Micah Parsons, his track record, his lack of injury record, there is no reason for the Cowboys not to pay him other than the fact that they've already dug themselves into two extremely lucrative deals that that put them in a tough spot. That you can't have, like I said, your roster be that top heavy. But to get into the actual preview of how their season went last year, it was pretty bland. And if I'm being entirely honest, um, I'm not ashamed to admit at all that I did not watch all 18 or 17 Cowboys games last year. I couldn't subject myself to that. It got to a point where once Dak Prescott got hurt, we hung around like with some tough defense once Michael Parsons got back from his injury, but the team just wasn't. It didn't have the depth needed. It couldn't stop the run. They couldn't really run the ball that great. And you know, there's reason to believe some of those problems will pass over into this year, but they have it made a couple moves here and there. Obviously, bringing in George Pickens, that's the main one. A real wide receiver too, the best wide receiver too the Cowboys have had in quite a while, maybe ever. I can't recall a wide receiver with the pedigree of George Pickens on the Cowboys, at least not in my lifetime. But also switching head coaches, promoting Brian Schottenheimer. It's going to be an interesting year in Cowboy land, that's for sure. If not for, maybe they won't be the best team in the league, but they're sure as hell going to put up a lot of points, and they're going to be in a lot of entertaining football games.
I think George Pickens is the best training camp wide receiver in the NFL because all the ridiculous catches he makes just out there in training camp. And he's been that really going back to his rookie year with the Steelers. He's a freak. But going back to real fast to the Micah Parsons situation. With the TJ Watt negotiations, as he got 41 million average, the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, as the price just keeps going up, right? For over 3 years. So it's a 3-year extension for Watt. So he's locked in through his age 35 season, which is about right, I think. And I would have been pissed if the Steelers did not pay him. For Watt, it was the guaranteed money. And that's what I think it is for most NFL players nowadays in these contract negotiations. It isn't necessarily like the total amount of money. Obviously, they want to be paid the highest. The next man up wants to be paid the most amount of money. But I honestly don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it's about give me the most amount of money. Like, let's make this a massive deal. I think the holdup in most of these contract situations is either A, guaranteed money. That often is like the big time thing. because none of these contracts are fully guaranteed in the NFL. And so you want to get as much guaranteed money on the deal as you can. And TJ Watt did a great job of that. He ended up getting 108 million guaranteed. That's what got the deal done in the end. Or it's like the length of the contract or average annual value. What do you think from your perspective, since you're more plugged into the Cowboys than me? What do you think that is with Micah? Do you think it's the guaranteed money, or do you think it's just they're flat out not even close on anything?
From what I've read, negotiations haven't really gone anywhere. Like they haven't gained any steam really at all.
Okay.
And I think, you know, the Cowboys, it's not like the Bengals where the owner is poor compared to other owners and they don't have like the actual like cash on hand to pay. It's not like that at all because Jerry Jones has the money. The Cowboys are the most lucrative franchise on earth. It's just that he's stubborn and he wants to be, you know, he wants the headlines. He wants to be in the spotlight at all times, and it's just exhausting. It's so exhausting. Like I'm so beyond tired of it. Like I don't even want to complain about it anymore because it's so antiquated and just pointless.
Yeah, so I'll say a couple things before we get into our off-season additions. When you look at this Dallas Cowboys team under Mike McCarthy, the previous regime, and with Dak Prescott as their quarterback, they've been really successful in the regular season. Outside of last year when Prescott got hurt, was out the entire second half of the season, things just kind of spiraled, once he got hurt. But and they weren't great with Prescott. Like they were 3-5, I think, in the games that he played. So outside of last year, the previous 3 years before that, it was 12 wins, 12 wins, 12 wins. Okay. And then last year they go 7-10, finishing third place in the NFC East. Compare them to the 49ers, for example. Now, obviously, the obvious difference between the Niners and the Cowboys is the Niners have been to multiple NFC championship games and a couple Super Bowls. But the Niners go 10 wins, 13 wins, 12 wins. And then last year they go 6-11, finishing last place in their division. But for the Niners, it looks a little better because they actually get to play a fourth place schedule. Now the number one easiest schedule in the NFL this upcoming year. Obviously, no schedule is easy, but relative to the rest of the league, their schedule is viewed as, based on what happened last year, more manageable than the rest. While the Cowboys, unluckily, I don't know if this is like luck or how just things work. They actually have to play the 11th toughest schedule in the league this year. After finishing third in their division, which just typically isn't the case. So a lot is the same, but a lot has actually changed. They have the same left tackle, the same left guard, the same center, the same right tackle. Over half their defensive starters will be the same. I believe their entire secondary is going to be the same. Trayvon Diggs, Dayron Bland, Donovan Wilson, and Malik Hooker. They do have a newly made running back room. We'll talk about that in a minute. And they do have a new wide receiver too, a much needed addition to this team, as that's kind of been a black hole in a vacuum over the last couple of years. But the tight end room's the same. The quarterback's going to be the same. The only thing that's really different is the coaching staff. They get rid of Mike McCarthy. They finally part ways. They bring Schottenheimer in, not really, because he was already the offensive coordinator. But they elevate him to head coach. They hire Matt Eberflus, which is actually a move I really like, as the defensive coordinator. It's a new coaching staff. So it'll be an interesting year in Dallas. There were downfalls to last year's team beyond just like the surface level issues that existed, with Dak's injury being one of them. But I won't dive into that right now because we need to go ahead and get into our offseason additions.
Yeah, there's so many things to rant about on this team, so we could go all day. But yeah, let's get into the additions. For me, my three favorite offseason additions for this team all come from their draft. Number three, I had Donovan Ezeraku, their round 2 pick out of Boston College. Some draft pundits had him going in the top, in the top 20, and most had him as a first round talent. I'd say he probably fell a good 10, 15 picks from where I saw him, but either way, regardless, I think he'll make an impact right away on this team as at the very least, a very solid run defender. I love his size. I love his burst. And he has a good amount of power to where if he can translate that into a bull rush at the NFL level, he can develop a nice pass rush profile off of that. We see a lot of guys with that, power profile, if they're able to translate that to the NFL, become extremely successful. So I'm excited about him. My number 2 favorite addition, Siobhan Revel, the cornerback out of Eastern Carolina, I believe it was, coming off an ACL injury. He fell in the draft a little bit, got him in the third round. He's extremely athletic, but he is more experienced in like zone, like off zone coverage than he is in like straight up man. Um, so it does fit well with Matt Eberflus's system, but in situations where you do have to play, man to man coverage, because they are going to happen regardless of the system you have. That is going to be an interesting dynamic there. And then my number one was Tyler Booker. I really liked that pick out of Alabama. Some have said like it was a little bit early, but if you look at the type of running game the Cowboys want to have, with it being a power run scheme, it's not a wide zone run scheme where you have to move laterally and have that kind of side to side agility. We really have a run game that's more forward, like direct, power, like gap type of running scheme. So I think he suits that extremely well because he just has, he has a really nice first step off the ball and explosiveness. He doesn't have the like greatest, like I said, side to side agility, which is why some teams may have had him lower because he wouldn't fit in a wide zone running game. But for what this team wants to do, I think he fits really well.
Okay. For my list, my number 3, Jaden Blue, the running back out of Texas in the 5th round. I know there has been noise about his work ethic, his football attitude, but every time I see this guy, I see a clip from Cowboys training camp, Jaden Blue's making a play. I truly believe that he's going to have an opportunity to really push Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders for a starting spot in that backfield.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I think he's going to compete for playing time immediately, even if he's not named the starter right away. I think he just offers a different level of explosiveness, and his ability on passing downs to be a weapon is, I think, really going to help Dak and just really going to help this offense overall. He's really explosive. We saw that over and over at Clemson. You're just going to have to make sure he holds onto the football, number one. And number two, he's just locked in to the day-to-day in the league. But I really think he's going to be a really good player, make a really solid career for himself in the NFL. Texas is going to miss his explosiveness. Not to turn this back into a Longhorn conversation, but I don't know for sure that Texas has a back right now in their current backfield that's nearly as explosive as Jaden Blue was. Now, Does that mean bad things? Not necessarily, but a lot of people thought at some point this past season that he would be a guy that would be at Texas another year, and that's just not the case. What did he run in the 40? Wasn't it something nuts like a 4.29 or something like that?
Yeah, I
Just
think it was in the 4.2s. Yeah.
just crazy. My next one was Siobhan Ravel. I've actually been pretty high on him since I started, studying this last year's draft. He was once viewed as a first round selection. It's just the injuries and the unavailability of actually playing in football games kind of hurt his draft stock. But otherwise, like, he's got all the ability in the world. He flashed elite ball hawk skills during his last full season that he played back in 2023. So I love that pick. Just add another crazy athlete to the secondary. Can never hurt. If he hits, he could hit big time. And then it came down to Tyler Booker or George Pickens for me at number 1, but I went with Tyler Booker just because I value offensive line play more than I do the wide receiver position. When you look at the lack of a run game at times last year for Dallas, which we'll talk about here soon when we get to X factors, they needed to prioritize their immediate needs in this draft. And some people viewed it as kind of a uncharacteristic decision for this organization because oftentimes for like the last decade or so, at least from my viewpoint, Dallas has often been they've been like one of the more successful franchises at drafting in the first round. But I think it's been because, at least to a degree, their patience and their willingness to maybe bypass their needs in favor of the best available player. Well, in this instance, they went with their needs. Zach Martin retired in February. They needed another guy to play right guard for them. He's going to start right away. And they passed over a handful of players that you'd probably say were better overall players than Tyler Booker, because Tyler Warren was available. But they went in favor of Booker, and I like it. He's just a mean monster on the offensive line, and I think he's going to help their running game right away to a certain extent. Obviously, you need the other, in a run scheme, you need the entire offensive line working together, but he'll be a nice piece. And I don't think you're ever going to have any questions about him off the field because he's just from what I can tell, he's just a great locker room guy. He'll be a great leader in that locker room eventually. I love that pick. So Cowboys running backs, we'll talk about this more, ranked 27th in yards before contact gain per attempt last year. 1.1 yards before contact last year. Not good. I think Booker will help to a certain extent to solve that issue.
Yeah, definitely. And you could argue that the running back position has more questions this year than it even did last year with Rico Dowdle, because Dowdle was solid. He didn't, create extra yards per se, but he got what was there. With this particular backfield now, Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, I don't know if at the stage that they're at in their careers that they even have the explosiveness to hit the hole and get what's there. Um, Especially for Williams, because I think that knee injury just really took his defining trait, which was his contact balance and his ability to get yards get those tough yards after contact, because he really didn't do that at all last year for Denver. So we'll see what happens in terms of that, but that's definitely one of the X factors we'll discuss.
Yeah. All right, let's start with X factors. What is your number one X factor for the Cowboys in 2025?
Well, I look at this passing game in particular, because this is no doubt the strength of this roster, and like no doubt about it, this was like what they wanted to like. They wanted to create a better passing attack for Dak to lead. Um, and my question is, can they be, a top 5 passing attack in football? Can they be, top 10? Like how good will this passing attack be? Because I think that's going to decide how far this team really goes, because the defense is questionable in terms of stopping the run. In pass defense, I think they'll be fine, but um, they're going to get scored on quite a bit. They're going to be matchup dependent. Like I think against a team like the Lions, they might get absolutely cooked, for example. But I think for the Cowboys to win games this season, it's pretty obvious to me that they're going to have to put up, you know, above 25 points pretty consistently. So just how good is this passing game? How good can, George Pickens gel with Dak? Can Jake Ferguson, return to form again? Um, Side note on that, actually, Luke Schumacher as a second round pick 2 years ago, 3 years ago, actually, complete bust. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking there. They drafted him as a 25-year-old tight end with Jake Ferguson already there. They ended up giving Jake Ferguson a contract extension anyway. So just absolute joke of pick there. But regardless, that's my number one X factor, because regardless of all the other question marks you look at on this roster, no matter, how bad those question marks end up being, this team still might be competitive depending on how good that passing game is.
Yeah, to build off what you're saying before I get into my number one X factor, um, you absolutely can't deny that the acquisition of Pickens enhances the outlook on the entire offense for Dallas if Prescott is healthy, right?
Yeah.
Because now you've got CeeDee Lamb working the short to intermediate parts of the field on those crossing patterns, those dig routes, and you can hit Pickens. You can really take the top off of defense now with Pickens with his downfield ability, down the sideline, winning in one-on-one situations. And Pickens being inserted into a better top-down offense with improved quarterback play, I think will just go a long way into having him more mentally locked in to football games. Because there were times in Pittsburgh, and you can't really blame him all that much for this. Sometimes he went over the top, but there were times in Pittsburgh where he just didn't have his head in the game, and it hurt the team. It hurt him. Just wasn't a good situation. But the dude's just like an absolute freak. He's averaged over 15 yards per reception every year he's been in the league. And these have been his quarterbacks. Ready for this? Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson, Mitch Trubisky, Justin Fields, and Mason Rudolph. And now he gets Dak Prescott. So I think that as long as those two can mesh and have the chemistry like you talked about, and Dak with, I think, his leadership, that level of like the intangibles that Dak has, his ability to lead, which is one of the things he does best. One of the things I respect about him the most. That's something that Pickens, he hasn't had that infrastructure yet in his NFL career. And a lot of the he's gonna give you like wow plays. Like there will be a couple games this season where your jaw just drops on some of the catches that George Pickens will make down the field. It's just like it's unheard of, the ability that he has. It's special. But there will be times where you're gonna have to reel him back in because it's just kind of the person he is. It's just kind of the character that he is. I think he'll be better though in Dallas. The only thing I hope for the Cowboys, and I genuinely hope this, is that the Steelers don't know something with Pickens that we don't know. or they know something that we don't know with Pickens. Because if you look at the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers trading away wide receivers, we'll just do a quick history lesson here for a minute.
Oh God.
Antonio Brown had a career high 15 receiving touchdowns in 2018, which was his last year in Pittsburgh. After Pittsburgh, he started a total of 7 games over 3 years in New England and Tampa Bay. Now, to his credit, he did actually catch a touchdown pass in that Super Bowl against Kansas City. But outside of that, it wasn't much of anything. Chase Claypool, 13 touchdowns in 2 full seasons in Pittsburgh before they traded him away in 2022 to the Chicago Bears, still on his rookie deal. After Pittsburgh, he started a total of 5 games in 2.5 seasons with a total of 1 touchdown and didn't post a single stat last year. In fact, I don't even know if he played in the NFL last year. If he did, I didn't see it.
I don't think he did. No.
Deontay Johnson, he was with the Steelers for 5 seasons. He caught 25 touchdowns through 2023, and he actually did earn a extension to some extent. Very productive, 25 touchdowns in 5 years. I mean, that's 5 touchdowns per year. But after Pittsburgh, he's played his way already through 3 teams who have cut him: the Panthers, the Ravens, and the Texans. I think the Ravens have cut him multiple times, in fact, and now he's on the Browns. Juju Smith-Schuster, again, he left the Steelers. He ended up winning a Super Bowl with the Chiefs, so he did that. But with the Steelers, he caught 26 touchdowns through 2021 with Pittsburgh. And after Pittsburgh, he's played on 3 teams, and he's averaging 2 touchdowns per year. And then Martavis Bryant, 17 touchdowns in 3 years with the Steelers. After Pittsburgh, he never caught a single TD and was out of the NFL after 1 more season.
Jeez,
so
yeah,
the only point I'm trying to make, and again, I don't think this is going to happen with George Pickens, because I actually do really like George Pickens. The point here is, though, the Steelers have known at almost 100% accuracy when to move on from wide receivers who have the personas that at times are distractions, which is what Pickens can sometimes be. So I'm just putting that out there to educate the people, not to make this a Steelers podcast, but I hope that for the Cowboys, the Steelers don't know something that, or the Steelers know something that we don't. But my number one X factor, sorry for the tangent, is going to be this running game. And a lot factors into it. Both the running back room, which is a big question mark right now, with Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue added in there, with Miles Sanders, of course. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. But the offensive line also plays into this equation, along with, obviously, Brian Schottenheimer to a certain extent. They need to be better on first down in the run game. Last year, on first down runs, in Dak starts, that's just with Dak through week 9, on first down runs, Dallas ranked 32nd dead last in yards per carry. They ranked 28th in EPA per rush, and they were 30th in success rate. Got to be better on first down, got to be better overall on the run game. Again, I think Tyler Booker helps with that. But he is filling some big-time shoes in Zach Martin, who, I mean, look, we just got 4 new members to the Pro Football Hall of Fame earlier today. There were some great ones. It was a smaller class relative to some of past years, but, I mean, Sterling Sharp, Antonio Gates. There were some really good players, Jared Allen, really good players inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And eventually, when his time comes, I do think Zach Martin will be giving a speech in Canton, Ohio. He went something like almost 7,000 snaps without a single holding penalty accepted against him. It's something wild like that. Tyler Booker is filling big shoes, but they got to be better running the football, period. Because if they're not, you're asking Dak to do a lot coming off an injury, which I wouldn't want that to. It'll be much easier for this offense if they can run the football better on first down. Now, at times, it wasn't like, as you mentioned, that dire. Let's see. Where did they rank last year in the run game? Do you know where they ranked in total
I think it
run
was in
game?
the low 20s, I want to say.
So here I have it
Or high
as
teens.
they averaged 100.3 yards per game rushing, 27th in the NFL.
Okay. Yeah.
So the running game
Congrats.
overall needs to be better, and it'll be interesting to see who emerges from this running back room to help that cause. They have Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Williams, who's kind of been a shell of himself since suffering that devastating knee injury back in 2022. And then Miles Sanders, who only has 79 touches with the Panthers last year, missing 6 games with an ankle injury. So if this really is going to work out, you're going to need offensive line to be healthy, and you're going to want one of those two guys. I think the Cowboys are betting on one of those two guys to be number one, healthy, and number two, like a productive back to pair with Jaden Blue, who you can bring in, use on third down, um, use him out of the backfield on wheel routes, things of that nature, which we saw him do very, very effectively at Texas and use kind of his explosiveness to a degree. So that would be kind of my number one. You mentioned the passing game. I mentioned the running game. Is there anything else defensively that we need to talk about?
The run defense. They fucking sucked at run defense last year. They were terrible. And the blame doesn't go on one guy. I'm not gonna point fingers. Mozzie Smith. Um, but yeah, the Mozzie Smith has been relied on the last couple of years as a former first round pick to step up. And last year was really rough, man. I had, higher hopes, after a rough rookie season, like maybe, he got his weight figured out and he could figure things out going into the second year. But man, oh man, was it rough.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Actually, that was his third year last year. Excuse me. But regardless, really rough year last year for Mozzie Smith. They're going to be relying on him again this year. They obviously bring back Osa Odigizua, who I think is a really underrated number 2 rusher and can make splash plays in the run game, but he's undersized, and if you double team him, he's gonna get pushed back. Like that's just part of it. He's not you know he's not Vince Wilfork or anything. So the run defense, particularly from a defensive line standpoint, is going to be really interesting. They brought in the linebacker out of from Cincinnati in free agency, Jack Sanborn. I think he
Mm-hmm.
could be pretty interesting, just until DeMarvion Overshown comes back. But the D line, like that interior D line, can they hold up like at all? I think this edge room can be really good. They're going to get Sam Williams back, who I think is underrated. Like might have a chance to have a breakout year this year if he gets his knee right, if he comes back healthy. Because he had a really nice second year and he was set to have a maybe a breakout third year. He was having a really good training camp and he just gets hurt like right in the right at the end of camp, I think it was. So the edge group I feel really good about. The secondary I feel decent about, but that interior defensive line, man, is
Mm-hmm.
rough.
Yeah. Real quick to add on to my point for this running game for Dallas. If we only include the first 8 games of the season last year when Dak was still the quarterback, the Cowboys ranked 26 in yards before contact per rush. So yeah, it wasn't good. They didn't really have an effective run game consistently. Zach Martin made 10 starts last year, but he missed the latter half of the season, and he just recently retired. Again, the stat I was looking for, 6,659 pass pro snaps in his 11-year career with 0 accepted holding penalties in pass protection in 11 years. That's virtually impossible, but if there's one stat that's going to get him into the Hall of Fame, that should be it. Um, it just didn't make much sense. 30th in yards per carry, 23rd in EPA per rush, 20th in success rate, 31st in explosive rate. When Dak was the quarterback in the run game, 140 running back runs, meaning running backs carried the ball 140 times through week 9 when Dak was the quarterback. None of those runs resulted in a rush over 15 yards. Zero runs by running backs over 15 yards when Dak was the quarterback last year. Worst in the NFL. They had 2 runs longer than 15 yards in that time period. Both were not running backs. So one was by CeeDee Lamb, and the other was a Dak Prescott scramble. The running back, it just wasn't a explosive, effective running game. So that's got to be better. And then I think a big part to like the Cowboys ethos when they were winning 12 games year over year, even though just like my Steelers, things have not quite worked out in the playoffs. But when Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator, I remember this defense for like wreaking havoc,
Yeah.
creating turnovers, being opportunistic. In fact, from 2021 through 2023, Dan Quinn's last year with the Cowboys, they every single year they were plus 10 in turnover margin or better. And those were the 3 years that they, I believe, went on to win 12 games. Yep. And they were in the playoffs every single year. Now, there had been like 8 teams or something like that with a plus 10 turnover margin or better 3 consecutive years, and none of them ended up doing it a 4th consecutive year. But like they were forcing turnovers. They were opportunistic, and it didn't really work out that way last year. They got to get back to playing clean football and winning the turnover battle. That goes a long way in the NFL. 9 of their 17 games last year, they lost the turnover battle. And in those 9 games, they were 1-8. It just goes a long, long way. It's a massive contributor to their 7-10 result of a season last year. And so a lot of the reasons why the Steelers win so many games in the regular season, even with bad quarterback play, is because they do kind of the same thing. They take away the football. Their defense just finds a way to give the offense an extra possession. They don't really give away the football all that much. So I think that could be a key for the Cowboys. But we've gone really long in this Cowboys segment, so we got to wrap things up. Really fast. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, most likely scenario. What is it in your eyes for Dallas?
Best case scenario, Tyler Guyton takes a step forward in year 2. The defensive line comes together and is one of the best pass rush units in football. The defense is a good unit again, and they win 12 games. Worst case scenario is they can't stop the run for shit. They can't run the ball for shit, and then they have to rely on Dak and the passing game for everything. And they don't get on the same page with George Pickens enough, and they probably win like 6 games. I mean, with that schedule to close the year, oof.
So what's the most likely then?
Most likely, I think, is like right at 8.
Okay.
Shout out to
Right
Steve.
at 8. Shout out to Steve. He's got an opinion on the Cowboys for sure. Let's go ahead and move on to the Packers, as we went a little bit over where we wanted to be on the Cowboys, but that's okay. We've got a lot to say.
Yeah.
So Jordan Love entering his sixth NFL season, but he just completed his second season as Green
Jeez.
Bay's full-time starter. Um, and look, I mean, at times he's shown tremendous growth. He helped the Packers to an 11-6 record last year, despite battling injuries throughout the season. Um, you know, but unfortunately for him, in a 5-point loss to the Eagles in week 1, with just 15 seconds left in the entire game, he was hit by 2 defenders, causing his knee to twist unnaturally. And he was just kind of dealing with that knee injury, which was confirmed to be a sprained MCL, and some other, bumps and bruises associated with play the rest of the season. And to some extent, I do think that actually affected his play. But they still had a fairly successful season last year, winning 11 games. This franchise has been kind of a model of consistency to some degree.
Yeah.
You know, what? How many games did they win the year before? Wasn't it like? Do you know? I'll pull it
I
up.
want to say it was like 10.
Um,
That was the year that was
yeah,
the first year under Jordan Love. They were the seven
that's it.
seed and they got hot late in the year.
9-8, and they won a playoff game. I do remember that. Um,
Me
Yeah, I
too.
mean, they draft really well. I think they're well run, even though they're not typically a franchise that they've never been a franchise that is super aggressive in the offseason, but they draft and develop really, really well. I think they're like a top 5 team in terms of drafting and developing players. And this
Yeah.
team's really
No
young.
question.
This team's really young, and it shows. Like that shows in the makeup of this 2025 version of the Packers. And I think they had another really good draft this year. So um, let's go. You have anything else you want to add on the Packers from last year before we get into off-season additions?
Well, I think the 2024 Packers were a prime example that progression from young players is not linear. Like, I think a lot of people expected more out of that D line with a lot of young talent, Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, former first round picks. A lot of people expected more out of that D line. A lot of people expected more out of Jordan Love. Even the wide receiver core. That's a young unit. People expected more from. Even myself. But they still won 11 games on the strength of having a elite head coach. In my opinion, I think that's really the brunt of it. And I think the defining trait of last season was that they didn't beat any good teams. They beat the teams that they were supposed to beat, and that's how they got to 11 wins. But when it comes to the elite teams in the NFC or in football, they didn't beat any of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a big key for them is going to be playing better in division. I think they were 1-5 last
Yeah.
year in their division. That can't happen
Yep.
again. But I mean, if you're a Packers fan,
And the one win they got was off a blocked field goal in Chicago, by the way.
I mean, a win's a win in the NFL. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you actually have to block the field goal to make it a blocked field
True.
goal.
Yeah. You got to give him credit for that, but also like sloppy.
Yep.
It was
Mm-hmm.
sloppy.
So let's go ahead and jump into off-season additions. I know what my number one is. If you want to go top to bottom, my number one is Matthew Golden. Not to be,
Yeah. I had
not
the
to
same.
jump the gun. I think some will argue in a couple of years that Matthew Golden was the best receiver in this draft class. I think that's very likely. Capable of contributing as a downfield weapon. Um, you know, he's got pretty much everything. The route running, the ability to go up and catch the football in one-on-one situations, made a lot of those tough grabs at Texas last year. People were actually to some extent questioning how fast he is, and he ended up running like one of the fastest times at the entire combine. He's just like so solid as a football player. I don't think there's outside of like devastating injury, I don't think there's a way this kid busts. I think he's I just think he's that good. And then
Pause.
I did like a lot of their other picks. Savion Williams in the third round, 6'4" wide receiver out of TCU. 10 catches, 20 or more yards downfield. He's not really a consistent threat after the catch, but I did like that pick. Love the Barron Sorrell pick, of course. Um, I liked a lot of their draft, but I'd add a couple of their offseason free agent additions into this mix to go along with Golden. They go out and they get Aaron Banks to solidify the interior of their offensive line. He comes over from San Francisco, good player. And then they go out and they sign Nate Hobbs, a nice player, I believe, from the Raiders in free
Yeah,
agency.
from Las Vegas.
So it's not like they didn't spend any money in free agency. They just didn't make like a ton of moves. But those would be the three that stand out to me.
Yeah, and I think I'm kind of right there with you, honestly. This team did draft 2 Longhorns, so shout out to them, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Barron Sorrell went in the 4th round. Um, I think the main storyline to come out of this offseason, which I'm sure we'll address in the X factors, but we can touch on it now, is they kind of created a hole in their cornerback room by releasing Jair Alexander a year before his contract was up, which I
Yeah.
found really interesting because it looked like for a while that they were able to, I guess, rectify things, like get things back under wraps in terms of
Mm-hmm.
that relationship. But then all of a sudden, you just heard that he was released, and it was like, wow, like they really did it. But yeah, that's a big loss, man. He did not play a whole ton the last couple of years, but when he was out there, he was a legit number 1 corner. So now you're relying on Keyshawn Nixon to be your lead corner, um, which is no doubt about it is a question mark.
Yes, indeed it is. One quick note, just as I'm looking at things. For Golden, like I just wonder what this isn't like a concern or necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. What is the target share going to look like in Green Bay? Because you've got Christian Watson coming back, right? He missed um he actually might miss a large chunk of this year, but he'll be back
Mhm.
eventually.
Yeah,
You have Gordon joining that mix, but you also have Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, and Dontavian Wicks on a depth chart. And then to add to that, you got the tight ends. You've got Musgrave and all their other targets,
Tucker
along
Craft.
with
Yeah,
and Tucker Craft, along with Josh Jacobs. Like, I just wonder. It's a thought that entered my head. What is the target share going to look like in that receiving room? Because there's only one football, and there's one,
yeah.
two, three, four, five, six, seven receivers / tight ends.
And in my opinion, like that question is the reason why I think they had to draft Golden in the 1st round. I think
Mhm.
Golden is the number 1 guy in this receiver room pretty clearly,
You would think
given that
so. Yeah.
Dobbs has had concussion issues. One more concussion for Dobbs, and you start to have serious like Tua like conversations there in terms of whether he should retire, which is pretty scary. And then Dontavion Wicks, I think led the league in drop rate last year. The dude
Mhm.
can get open. There's no question about it. He can run routes. He can do all the you know wide receiver stuff in terms of athleticism, but you got to be able to catch the football at the end of the day. And then Jaden Reed, I think, is going to be the main part of this pairing. Jaden Reed is really freaking good, and um, he's a guy that I'm targeting.
All right. So if you had to pinpoint one X factor for the Packers, the thing that's going to determine whether or not they have a successful season, what is that one thing?
I mentioned the cornerback room earlier, but I think I actually am gonna go to the defensive line on this one. You look at this defensive line, and they've invested a lot of capital into making this unit, one of the best in football, and it hasn't been that.
Mm-hmm.
You look at it, and it's Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, obviously Kenny Clark, who's been really good for a long time at this point, 9-year veteran. Rashawn Gary, who last year had kind of a down year, but I think will bounce back now that he's 2 years removed from the ACL tear. So that D line, I think, given how talented that group is, they need to show it in their production because there's a lot of intriguing talent and names there. But when you watched the Packers last year, you didn't really feel that consistently
Mm-hmm.
enough. So in order for this defense to take the step that they want to take, and I think the reason why they didn't really make a lot of moves on defense this offseason is because they feel like in that building, they are going to make that step as a defensive line, but it's still a question mark. It needs to happen.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the reasons I feel pretty confident in their secondary, despite, you know, releasing Jair Alexander, and I think one of the reasons he got released was because he's only played in 14 total games. I think the last 2 years he played
Yeah,
in 7 games last year for the second season in a row. There's been some injuries there, and I think he's now in Baltimore. Of
yeah,
course, he's in Baltimore. Anyway, uh, with that in mind, though, like they did sign Nate Hobbs, 4-year, $48 million, not overly like outrageous.
yeah,
Um, and he's a guy who's played primarily in the slot throughout his career. Keyshawn Nixon, who you mentioned, was playing in the slot a lot early on. He actually played more outside last year. I do like that they kind of have that switchability there and that versatility. Both guys can
yeah.
play the slot and both guys can play. I don't know if Hobbs can play outside, but I mean, you'd think he might be able
Yeah,
to.
I think he could do
Um,
it. Yeah,
but their safety room was one of the best in the NFL last year. Xavier McKinney, they paid him last offseason, and
yeah.
he
He
um
delivered.
he delivered big time. 8
Oh yeah,
interceptions, one off the league lead, earned his first All-Pro selection. Good for him. He comes over from the Giants. And then they have Bullard and Evan Williams, 2 rookies who saw significant work last year, with Williams getting more time later in the year as Bullard played more slot corner. I just love their safety room. Hopefully, you think Bullard or Evan Williams, or maybe even both, take a step this year, going into their second years in the league. You have Xavier McKinney kind of manning things as a ball hawk back there. It'll just come down to how good is Keyshawn Nixon. Um, that's really what I feel like it's going to be, because I like a lot of their pieces back there. The pass rush does need to be more consistent. They did finish with 45 sacks last year, which was actually 8th in the league. They were 13th in pressure rate, so a little above average. And while those overall numbers are good, no one really stood out to me as like an alpha in that room last year. It wasn't the most consistent unit in the league. You had Rashawn Gary, who led the team with 7.5 sacks, 12% pressure rate. Good player, very good and
yeah,
productive player, but he was 45th among qualified pass rushers in pressure rate. And then you had a guy like Lucas Van Ness, who they drafted a couple years ago, and you know he's been pretty solid, a 9.5% career pressure rate. I think they were hoping for more out of a guy like Brenton Cox, who had just 4 sacks last year, albeit on a small sample size. I want to see, if it were me and I was Green Bay, even though the numbers were there, the production ended up being there. I want to see someone really kind of emerge from this room, because I think that would help. They just need to be more consistent game to game with their pass rush, because
Yeah, and
their defensive front overall was strong. Like,
yeah,
they were 7th in the NFL in yards per carry allowed to running backs. They were 4th in yards before contact allowed. They were good overall as a defensive front, as a unit, but I want to see an alpha emerge.
yeah, and I think I think that's why it's the X factor, is because the route for this team to win a Super Bowl is with an elite defense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as good as I think this offense can be, I still think with the amount of talent on this defense and year 2 under Jeff Hatley, I think there's an opportunity to take a step forward as an entire unit defensively there. So, yeah, I think Rashawn Gary, with the money they're paying him, he needs to be better, like flat out, point blank. He's the veteran star guy on that unit.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be better. And then I think the rest of it will follow suit.
And then, like, as we mentioned earlier, going back to the receiver conversation, I do think it is, can there be a number one receiver that emerges? Is that Matthew Golden? I think it's likely that it probably is, if he is who I think he is and who we think he's been. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but they've got the depth. In fact, they could probably even trade one of these guys and still be a-okay. They might benefit, actually. Maybe it's at the deadline, or maybe it's closer to the season, at dealing one of these guys. I'm sure another team, a receiver needy team, would take one of these dudes, and they could get something good for them. Maybe you add to another part of your team, because you'd be dealing from I guess, a relative point of strength on your roster, just in terms of the depth that's there. But someone's got to emerge as that number one option. I think Jaden Reed could perhaps be that guy, but he's kind of been limited to more of like a slot role this far in his career, which I think kind of puts a cap on, how much he can do in a game. It's a crowded depth chart. They were kind of a run heavy team last year. But I do want to see one of those receivers emerge as a number one, and they got to be better at catching the football. They weren't a very good team at actually catching the ball last year. They had problems with drops all year long. So they got to be better in that area as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, with that, I think we can get into the best case scenario, worst case scenario conversation here. What
Mm-hmm.
is their over under win total for this year?
I have it right here. It is 9.5. 9.5. That's what
Okay,
I have in
yeah,
front of
nine and
me.
a half. Ooh, I probably lean over, given the amount of talent that's on this roster. But it really does depend on, can they be better in this division, and can they get at least one marquee win against a elite opponent? I think that's going to, factor in terms of how we view them going into the playoffs. Because
Mm-hmm.
while they did, have competitive games against those top tier opponents, they never really got over the hump.
Mm-hmm.
So I think best case scenario, this defense is a top 5 unit in football. I think that's in the cards. Absolutely. I think best case scenario that happens, and then the offense comes together as well. Matthew Golden is their number one guy. Jordan Love takes another step forward in year 3. I think this team can win like 13 games. If
Yeah,
all of that comes together, 12, 13
I could see
games.
it.
I think that's on the cards. But on the other side of that, I think Worst case scenario, I think we see maybe not a regression from Jordan Love, but maybe just like him plateauing.
Mhm.
And maybe they win like 8 or 9 games because I don't see them falling much below that. Because you look at the depth on this team, I think this is one of the deepest rosters in football, particularly in the
Mhm.
trenches. Um, like that's like the trenches of this football team. They've invested draft
Yeah.
pick after draft pick after draft pick. Like
Mhm.
look at their backup linemen. Round 2 pick,
That's what
round 7 pick, round 5 pick, round 1 pick.
that's what good organizations do. Look at the Eagles. What do the Eagles
Yeah,
draft every single year? It's just like
they
they're a
drafted
well-run
developmental linemen
organization.
late. Yeah.
One of the reasons I have very high confidence that this team has a very high floor in that 8-9 win range is this coaching staff because they showed fantastic kind of malleability last season, quickly changing the offense, going from Jordan Love in that week 1 injury because they had to play for a couple weeks. I don't remember exactly how long it was. They had Malik Willis as their starting
Yeah, it was
quarterback.
2 weeks. Malik Willis. Yeah.
Like it wasn't
Yeah.
they could have recovered maybe, I think, because it was so early on. Like they had time. It was only September. But like they were able to adjust on the fly with Malik Willis and win football games with Malik Willis. And I think that's just a great sign that suggests this coaching staff will be able to handle kind of whatever comes their way this year in 2025. Every year in the NFL, there are new challenges that you have, new adversity that you have to overcome, whether that be injuries, being probably the main one, or just like losing streaks or whatever it might be. Difficult schedule. I have a lot of confidence in Matt LaFleur and the consistency that he's shown in this, in his coaching career. One of the smartest guys in the league, I think, from an X's and O's standpoint. And I do have actually some confidence in Jordan Love, given that I think he's going to be healthy to start the year. Hopefully, nothing really happens to him. Green Bay always has a good offensive line. Um, as you mentioned, they're constantly investing and reinvesting into that offensive and defensive line. And I do think like they have good offensive line, good defensive line. Maybe neither are great or blow you away, but they're good and they have depth. They've got depth everywhere, pretty much. Outside of
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe corner. I don't know really what their depth chart looks like at corner, but otherwise, like you've got 2 or 3 good tight ends, you've got like 5 or 6 good wide receivers, you've got a really good head coach, you have a good quarterback when he's healthy, you've got who's got a big arm and he's really talented. You have 2 or 3, you always have 2 or 3 good running backs, you have a good offensive line, you have a good defensive line. The depth is just everywhere. You might not have like a alpha wide receiver. You don't really have an alpha pass rusher, but you do have a ton of really, really good players. And all that adds up to good seasons after good season after good season. Because you
Yeah.
can
And
really
by the yeah, sorry.
you can withstand a couple injuries here and there with as deep of a roster as they have.
Yeah, and by the end of the year, they could have an alpha wide receiver and an alpha pass rusher if Rashawn Gary
Yep.
or Lucas Van Ness or any of those guys take that step. They all
And
have the talent to do it.
if that happens and Jordan Love's healthy, this team could be on the periphery of Super Bowl contention. They will be
Yeah,
playing in divisional round weekend, maybe even NFC championship game weekend. Can't make any guarantees because I do think the top of the NFC is going to be brutal, with Philadelphia likely being somewhere in there, Detroit in their own division, Minnesota, who knows, that team could win 13 games again if JJ McCarthy is any good. We talked about that last episode. Like Tampa Bay, they're a model of consistency now.
Yeah.
Like
Philly,
it's
LA
not gonna
Rams.
exactly. It's not gonna be easy, but if that happens, what you just said, they'll be there. Green Bay will be a factor.
Yeah, and speaking from experience here, doesn't matter where your team is from. Nobody likes playing football at Lambeau in January because that fucking sucks. Let me tell you.
29 drops last year for Green Bay wide receivers. 6th most in
Oh
the
boy.
league.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
to stop.
It's got to be better. They still won 11 games despite of that. So that
Yep.
tells you what you need to know. But yeah, Green Bay is a really interesting team. Really fun episode here. This is probably the first episode where we have two teams that I think, if things go right, could be
Mhm.
in the divisional round. And for the Cowboys, it's more of a stretch than for the Packers. But I think these are two very interesting rosters for sure, with a lot of talent. So I think that'll do it for this episode. Any uh, any parting shots before we get here?
No, all I say is these are two of the most storied franchises in the NFL, and they play each other actually. Um, last week of September in Dallas, not too far from right now, September 28th. It'll be week number 4. Yeah, week number 4. At
Mm,
Green Bay at Dallas. So we will see that matchup sooner rather than later.
yeah, they love playing in Jerry World, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yes, they do. They really enjoyed it the last time they played there.
Yeah.
Probably too much. But anyways,
Yeah.
that's gonna do it, guys. We'll see you next week for teams. We're getting now into we're getting in. Do you agree with this? We're now next week jumping into another tier of teams. Like, would you kind of agree with that? Once
Yeah,
we get to
definitely. I
what will
think
be number 12 and 11, like I think we'll start to climb the ladder of tiers in the NFL of teams.
yeah, certainly. And the Packers have the ability to enter that tier, but they have too many questions as of right now. But these are the teams that have already proven it a little bit more.
Yep. All right. That's going to do it. We'll see you next week. And of course, be on the lookout for number 16 and 15. Excuse me. Number 16 and 15. This episode will be out sometime this upcoming week, probably middle of the week, later in the week. And then we've got Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports coming as well. So up until that first game, kickoff of college football season, kickoff of NFL season, it's going to be – this might be outside of the football season itself. This is going to be our most – August is going to be probably when we look back on 2025 – when we look at the amount of episodes we posted each month, I would bet August ranks in like the top 1 or 2.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Take us out of here, Emmy.
Yeah. With that all being said, appreciate y'all watching and peace out.
Peace.
Pay Micah, Jerry.
Yeah,
Fucking
you might
pay.